Yep, this is very straightforward. Just to ask in relation to the Crow report, when does the Minister believe that might be published? Thanks.
Thanks, Deputy. The Crow report was commissioned by my department. Crow Company was commissioned by my department to undertake an independent review of the costs of providing quality early learning and care and school-age childcare in Ireland. Planning is currently underway to launch the report, and I intend that this will occur before the end of this month. The Crow's brief included analysing the current costs of providing early learning care and school-age childcare and the factors that impact on these costs, the delivery of a model of the unit cost of providing ELC and SAC that allows analysis of policy changes and variations in cost drivers, and the provision of a high-level market analysis of the sector in Ireland. The review was intended to provide a robust evidence base for the further development of high-quality ELC and SAC in Ireland. The outputs, including the cost calculator developed through this project, were also intended to form a key input into the setting of capitation and subvention rates for ELC and SAC. Final outputs were received in January of this year, and preparations were underway to launch the report in April, but the launch, like so many things, was postponed due to the COVID pandemic. The findings from this review contributed to the evidence base that underpinned the temporary wage subsidy childcare scheme, and was later on used in looking at the employment wage subsidy scheme, which we've spoken about already and has provided so much support across the sector. And the findings also informed the development of funding packages for the phased reopening of the services since last June.
Deputy.
Thanks, Minister. So you expect that to be done by the end of September, the report? That would be very welcome, because I remember when it was first spoken about by the previous Minister, I would have welcomed the fact that we were going to have an independent report into the cost of providing childcare, because it's very difficult. We know for an absolute fact the workers are not paid enough. We know for a fact that many providers are struggling and find it difficult to keep the doors open. And we also know that parents constantly face a battle, first of all, to try and access a place, and then second of all, the costs. And so many, in particular women, end up, in a situation maybe having to go part-time, having to take parental leave days, maybe when they, wouldn't have envisaged taking them, and all sorts of situations, just to try and juggle the costs. And yet it's difficult to see who is benefiting from the high cost, because it's certainly not the workers. And the vast majority, particularly in rural areas, providers are maybe 1-2 women operations. So I really welcome the fact that that's going to be published, and I look forward to getting a copy. Thanks, Minister.
Absolutely, and obviously, I wasn't in place when this was commissioned, but I know from just talking with officials in the department, a huge amount of work has gone into this, and I suppose the work has been refined and kind of strengthened over the period where it was being undertaken. And I think, and again, in a reply to a question I said to you earlier on, this is coming in the context of other very significant pieces of research work that are being undertaken by my department. And I suppose sometimes, people give out about reports being undertaken, etc. And look, I can understand there's always a degree of scepticism. But on the other hand, and you know yourself, we're dealing with a sector that has built on a very ad hoc basis over the last 10 years after virtually no investment prior to that period. And I think going forward, if it's to work, if we're not going to just be acting in an ad hoc way, it is really important that we have that very sustained evidence base to actually work from and design kind of that new vision for childcare in the country.
Okay.
Just very briefly, that has been the difficulty, I suppose, for so many years. There hasn't really been a strategy. And, we went from a situation, I always reference that additional child benefit payment that used to be paid, that would at one point was seen as the solution. Then it went to, let's build purpose-built facilities. And while they all had a role to play, there was no really proper overall strategy. And at the end of all of that was the providers and the workers and the parents and ultimately the children, which is what this is all about, paying the price. So I do think, and yes, I can be sometimes sceptical myself of reports and reviews. It sounds like sometimes, an excuse for a talking shop or a way to push something down the road. But in this situation, we needed an independent report into the cost of providing the childcare. And I think, you know, it's long overdue, and it'll be great to get it when it is published. So
Minister.
thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think all the pieces of work that are being undertaken by the department at the moment are really valuable. And they will give us that evidence base to kind of design that long-term future, because, you know, and the comparisons are often made with Nordic countries and other European countries where a much more substantial amount of state investment goes into the sector. But that again is building on things that have been ongoing for decades, and we're not starting from scratch, but we are, after 10 years, that's the only context of which childcare is developing in Ireland, and it has always been as a response to a problem in this sector, a problem for that sector. We haven't had the opportunity maybe to take that step back and say, how is this operating? And even the operational model, which is kind of looking at the administrative infrastructure, which interests very few people, let's be honest, but I think it is important that we scrutinise the role of my department, the role of the 30 childcare, city and county childcare around the country, that all of those, there's a careful scrutiny of how the whole apparatus operates together, and hopefully by the middle of next year, when we get this information, we'll have a very significant evidence base around a wide range of areas which to build that future vision.
Thank you, Minister. We go